you start by telling us who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Ahmad Nassri. I'm the Chief Architect at TELUS Digital. TELUS is a Canadian telecom, and we're taking on our mission to digitize the 100-year-old company. We obviously adopt open source and work in the Node.js space. I personally contribute a lot to the Node.js ecosystem and to the community as well.
And I understand you were on a panel earlier today about the role of enterprise and open source software. Can you tell us a little bit about the panel and how it went?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about how, in today's world, the open source adoption of software in the enterprise is a key growth factor and transformational factor for a lot of companies. And, from my perspective, at least, the idea of companies having the moral obligation and for individuals to having professional responsibility, not only to be adopters of open source, but also contributors to it. The reality is a lot of these companies have more resources at their disposal, whether it's time or money, to actually help evolve the open source kind of ecosystem and help the community itself. And it can surface in many different ways, but mainly, the thing that open source needs the most is contributors and collaborators and communities.
So I work at Microsoft and I do a lot of open source there. So I'm gonna ask a totally leading question here,
Sure.
But why do you think it's important for enterprises to use and adopt open source? Like what value does open source bring to the enterprise?
Well, I think there's so many facets to that in terms of where we were as an industry like 10, 15 years ago and where we are today. I think the biggest leading indicator for why open source is actually valuable to enterprises is in the areas of the team members. You got a much bigger opportunity for scale and growth as a business when your community actually has a bigger community kind of umbrella around it, and that surfaces easily in the open source world. You have a better opportunity for hiring people because the open source community is a lower barrier of entry for people to actually get in and be productive on day one. And that's a good thing, meaning people can actually learn on their own, train and study on their own and pick up new things on their own, as opposed to the opposite, let's say the proprietary software application world. You need professional training, there's a cost to that. You need professional certification, there's also a cost to that. And you need licensed software to be able to actually operate the things that you want to build on. So that is not viable, is not sustainable for a fast growing industries that we have in today's world, and all of the industries today are technology focused. So needing developers to be part of the equation and being the ones to drive the evolution of the business is key. So that's the easy answer of saying, get more developers and get more engineers to actually be part of your team and help your growth. But the reality is, looking at going back to the Microsoft example, the value that you get from contributing and adopting open source software from just the business point of view, forget the technology, forget the software development practice in itself, just the business value it drives, there's lower cost, there's higher trust, and then there's definitely bigger impact in terms of society impact and community impact. So that helps you as a brand, it helps you as a business, lowering your cost obviously is a big thing, and having a higher level of trust that you can actually validate the products and services that you're doing by saying this is trusted by the community, and the community were part of building the product and service that I'm offering.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it. And so then let's look at the other way around. You kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but that there's a responsibility for enterprises to also be good stewards of the open source community and to give back. So what do you think first of all, do you think that's important? What do you think the best ways are for enterprises to give back to these communities?
Well, I think it can surface in many different ways. For us at TELUS, one of our kind of key foundational messages is we give where we live. And that's kind of a part of our company mantras amongst many other things. But to us as a company, that translates to, TELUS being one of the biggest philanthropic organizations in the world. We enable our team members to either volunteer their time to charitable organizations or contribute in local communities and contribute in many different ways beyond just software, right? But I think the open source aspect to that in the context of the software industry is key as well, at least for people like myself. So companies can do that by enabling their people to be contributors, enable their people to be community members, enable their employees to be an active participant in the community. But there's also obviously the financial aspect. That's the easy one. A lot of these kind of open source projects are built by individuals or groups of people who are passionate and may or may not have the financial foundation to support the work that they're doing. And we've heard the stories many times, and we've seen it many times over the years. Most recently comes to mind the story of OpenSSL. It was literally one person. And he was doing it because of his own passion for driving the outcome of that particular project. But a lot of people depended on it. And when that individual was not in a safe environment, in a supportive environment, in an environment that enabled him to continue supporting that massive community, everybody suffered. So this is where organizations can help, and they can help by just actually realizing how much they're dependent on these individuals and then supporting them. And I'm not just saying, financial support, there's many different ways of support, but just understanding that dynamic of your business actually relies on this is one of the first kind of steps that a lot of organizations need to take.
And so my last question for you is a two-part. So what brought you to NodeConf.eu, and what value do you think NodeConf.eu is bringing, or you attending NodeConf.eu brings back to TELUS?
So I came last year, and that was my first time attending NodeConf.eu. Again, as part of my contribution to the Node community and the Node project, I overlapped with a lot of individuals who are part of the Node core, and then I joined the kind of Node core itself and working on things like the community and the user feedback groups, and being able to carry that thought of I work for a brand and I work for a company, but I have a personal passion as well, and supporting that community. It's very important to me because when I started in the software industry, I only got to where I am today through the support of others and the support of the open source community. So taking that mantle on myself, but also bringing the brand and the company with me, saying, we as a company, we have an investment in open source, and I'm here to help share that back, and sharing that through multiple different ways, whether by connecting with other people who are building the tools that we're using, or just sharing some of the lessons and some of the kind of challenges that we face and how we overcame them. And we can only do that in a kind of events like this, where they're focused, they're kind of specific and topic around this ecosystem that we're all invested in. And I think the kind of the way this event has been set up is also very enabling of that aspect. Like, we're a little bit isolated. It's hard for us to not attend the full thing. It's hard for people to only attend part of it, let's say. But that's a good thing, because a lot of time I've noticed where you have events and conferences that you have the opportunity to sneak back into work or sneak back into your emails, you lose the value. So the way this NodeConf.eu was set up was really helpful in allowing people to disconnect. For me to actually represent my company in the work that I'm doing is valuable to share, but also to learn, and taking all these learnings back to the business and back to the company and back to the developers at the end of the day, because that's the team. The team is gonna want to learn about how company X and company Y have solved similar problems. So I'm playing the ambassador role in both directions, and that's why I'm here.
Great, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.